push a little further. Written by Greg Huffman. Performed by the author. He was feeling optimistic this morning. It was a morning that he hadn't felt in a while. An old feeling had returned. The iced latte he made was blended near perfect. Smooth flavor, not too rough or strong. It sat in front of him on the table. Having recently placed it there, he sat on the couch, kicked his feet up over the table, and placed the gun comfortably to his temple. Like a rush of endorphins. He didn't feel overly excited. He felt calm again, kind of happy. Could he actually pull it off this time? He wasn't quite at the wavelength he needed to be at, but he felt he might be able to reach it today. Today might be the fucking day, man. He went through his train of thought. He had to find just the right train of thought to send his train chugging through the tunnel into that ray of light on the other side. What made him curious was the thought of those that were chained to him in his life. The few good friends and even perhaps a couple of members of his family. He wanted to be the solipsist that kept the core workings of this planet going, and when the dead man's trigger went off, the dream should catch fire and wither the whole fabric of reality with it. Things wouldn't outlive him, but everything would die in unison with him. Maybe not die, but he wanted survivors to tell his tale. Tell the world about the world that used to be with his existence. He knew it was all a delusion, and that ultimately his death would just be as a popped pimple on the world's body, a little bit of gross, oozing pus that needed to be wiped away afterwards, but then quickly moved on from, and the world would then go on with its day. All the functioning machines going on anyways. The problem with the idea of us being cogs in the machine is that when the cog breaks down, the machine doesn't even halt for a moment. We weren't even worthy to be compared to cogs. We weren't shrugging atlases. The world just shrugs at us, and not even that, because we weren't even noticed or worth the time to glance over it, like a passenger noticing a dead possum on the side of the road. And this was what threw the wavelength off. He took a moment to sip his coffee, and he fiddled with his gun. He tapped it on his cheek. He buried it into the center of his forehead, wondering if he could pressure a little red dot into it like an Indian. Sometimes the delusions would hold. He only needed them long enough to push a little more into the trigger. He just needed the hammer to snap back down. What he would like to do in this moment of invulnerability would be to go after his enemies. The list was too long to get all of them. He could track one down, perhaps, but that would be a lot of work. Where would they even be? That took research. In his final moments, did he really want to be interacting with someone he despised? And sure, pulling the trigger on this person would feel fucking great. But then you've had that crossing the Rubicon moment, and your adrenaline dumps out of you. It would no doubt be the best high he had ever gotten. But then the wavelength fades. He would then have his courage leave him, and then he would be on the run, running out of fear, out of control. As beautiful as it sounded, it was a pipe dream. He wasn't crying. He wasn't worked up. He probably looked bored and apathetic. To some degree he was, but today he also felt upbeat. Was that fading away? It hadn't yet. The passage of time was terrifying to him, like being pulled slowly into the abyss. It wasn't that he wanted to jump into the abyss himself and get it over with. Well, maybe it was. Really, it was about timing. Time versus timing. There was sometimes a window of opportunity when death didn't scare him. It was fleeting, and if he didn't capitalize on it, he would be stranded here longer. And what was his motivation to leave? Sometimes he couldn't quite figure it out. He didn't have it worse than too many people. If anything, he thought, people usually live such boring lives. How were they so content with just so little? He felt he had so much, and yet the fact that this didn't make him content was what upset him. Too scared of doing nothing, and scared of doing anything every single day. How could people wake up with every day being in the same bed next to the same people, doing the same goddamn routine over and over again? They found meaning in their survival. What the fuck did they look forward to? They tended to children or to a lover. They didn't seem to be experiencing an evolving, self-improving self. They didn't even seem to like fun. I like to have fun was seeming to be like a less and less tautological remark the more he thought about it. People had no free time. Maybe that was his problem. He had too much free time. Too much free time. He never thought such a thing was possible. Like too much money. How depressing that to let pressure off of oneself in the form of working less or struggling less physically would only cause you to struggle more mentally and emotionally. What would it be like once he pushed far enough? He pushed on that trigger again, played with it. All he had to do to be free was push it all the way down. Committing was always a problem for him. It felt like sticking with something would get not boring, but too much, just too much. It would wear its welcome. In this case, perhaps that wouldn't factor, but there was the thought of having no thoughts. Would it be blackness? Would his consciousness be transported to a faraway land? It has been said that death is like before you are born, but he didn't think anyone had found this particularly inspiring. Before birth, you didn't ruminate on your existence or consciousness, and before birth, there was so much potential for what you might be. He sat there on his couch, his feet were down on the floor now. He was thinking, but this time his mind was wandering. He was already losing the energy he had built up this morning. He was searching the floor for the dregs. Well, it was nice while it lasted. He held his drink there in his hands, freezing them, taking sporadic drinks. He placed the gun in his mouth next. Not with any seriousness, just further fidgeting with it, like a bored twiddle of the thumb. There was no hope. He would go on with his day. He would survive a little longer. What was the meaning in his survival? Nothing but cowardice. Life was better than the alternative, right? Not necessarily, just sometimes less scary, less risk, a comfortable decaying away. Comfortable in a sense, otherwise filled with anxieties and letdowns and people you want to trust but can never be sure. Sometimes it feels good, and there is still some adventure left out there for you to truffle out. Some happiness to truffle out if you can endure the empty spaces around it. Sometimes your truffle pig nose leads you astray, and sometimes that happiness isn't the big oil field you hoped you had stumbled upon, and only a few little trickles touch your lips, and then you're even angrier than if you hadn't found it at all. Every day it felt like there was less of that manna left out in the fields to find. One day you'd search and search and you'd never ever find it. Maybe just a mirage out in the distance that keeps fading out into the background. You would see others and think they had it, but you weren't sure if it was all a facade or if it was genuine. What's more depressing? The thought of others being satisfied when you weren't, or the thought that they were secretly also suffering was bringing you a little joy. The depressing joy of misery having company. He would live another fucked day. Live. Fuck. He sat there, not moving. It was his day off. Sat there, fiddling, time wasting. He had an idea. He couldn't commit, true, but he could flip a quarter on it. He emptied the revolving chamber of 5 of the bullets. There was still one left in there. All of a sudden, he was excited again. Renewed joy. Hallelujah! He tapped his toes on the ground in giddiness. He put the gun to his temple. He could do it. He could finally fucking do it. He felt ready. Part of him wanted to hang on just a moment more. Not out of fear, but out of enjoyment of the moment. Enjoyment of his condition. Hang on to the drug while you can. He couldn't stay too long, obviously, or then he would cease to capitalize on the moment and leave on a bad note. He slowly applied pressure to the thing. He frolicked inside. He let go of the trigger, letting his finger hover in air. Then slammed the finger down on the fucker. Click! Relief. He had done it. He had survived, but he had faced his fears. Fuck, it felt good. The rush rushed through him. He threw the gun into the wall in the fit of his euphoria. It left a hole in the drywall. Fucking white people. He might have to get that fixed. Well, he was still alive, but he was fine with that for now. Besides, there was always his next day off, Tuesday.